Welcome to the Rotary News Network. Today, my guest is fellow Rotarian John Chappelear, principal of Changing the Focus, and I'm Margie Seaman, your host. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Margie. Thanks for working around my schedule.
And a schedule it is. I gather from the attempts we've made to sit down together that you are very busy. So before we begin talking about that schedule, tell us a little bit about Changing the Focus. What is Changing the Focus and why the name Changing the Focus?
Changing the Focus grew out of something that I call a gift of desperation, or a gift of devastation actually, which is I had a business back in the 80s and early 90s that sort of exploded in my face, and it was in the rebuilding of that business and in rebuilding my life that I realized that I needed to change my focus from what was in it for me to what was in it from me, and to begin to change my perspective in ways that I could benefit my employees, my clients, rather than just simply be focused on what am I getting out of this, but what are we getting out of this? And then that made all the difference in the world. That grew into the card, that grew into the book, which then grew into a whole consulting business, which I was very surprised about getting. But that's how it started. It started with a big explosion that I thought was terrible and turned out to be something that worked out to be great.
So you are a consultant to private business or private nonprofit or private nonprofit and government? What?
Well, I haven't found a situation yet where I couldn't help, but I tend to work with private business. I certainly do a fair amount of pro bono work for nonprofits, and I'm always happy to do that, especially on capacity building and things that they need, because nonprofits usually start out with a great heart and a great purpose, but leadership skills is not necessarily something that they excel in. Private businesses usually on a number of levels. One would be a gap analysis to determine the strategies and goals that you've set are actually happening the way you want them to happen. Two would be getting a company ready to go to market if they are interested in selling a business. Or three, creating succession planning for the owner of someplace to go next, rather than thinking about leaving something, but going towards something is a much more positive way to come at it.
So in the three-tiered approach that you just described, which aspect of that do you think is more compelling or requested of private companies today?
I think the problem with my business is that nobody seems to want to admit that they ever need to retire. Nobody ever wants to think about succession planning. And everybody wants to think that their strategies are right on track. So I've picked the trifecta of let's just ignore that problem. Really and truly, the thing that clients seem to get the quickest and most powerful return on investment is simply in the gap analysis. When I go in and take a look at what the strategic plans are and the strategic goals are, and then take a look at how well the departments are functioning relative to that planning. And then I'll put a plan together for the owner or the leadership of a company and show them where they want to be, where they are really, and how to get from one place to the other.
So John, we have a wide range of age groups watching this video across the country and the world, and I think some of the viewers might be interested to know, how did you get this knowledge, and what was the pivotal moment where you decided this is what you need to do with your life?
I think the thing that helps me a lot is that I spent 25 years as a CEO in a closely held corporation that I owned. I had 4 different companies that I built and ran in the Washington, D.C. area. I also worked for about the first 6 years of my career in a family business. So I understand family business, I understand closely held corporations, partnerships. I've taken 3 different companies and turned them around from failures to successes, so I also understand the bankruptcy issues and renegotiating debt and those kinds of things. So I have a lot of broad experience in understanding the ways in which to enhance leadership of a corporation. The thing that really sort of spurred me into this direction was when I had that explosion we talked about, that gift of devastation we talked about earlier. It was coming out the other side, building a new company on the other side of that, and having a number of CEOs come to me and say, I don't know what you're doing, but whatever you're doing, we would like to do that too. And we started just sort of a CEO roundtable where we came together once a month and talked about issues that were going on. And that led to a couple of guys in Leadership Washington, because I was in the Leadership Washington DC program, who came to me and said, you should really write a book about this. And so I did that and wrote the book. And then oddly enough, or gratefully enough, I guess the book sort of took off, and that led from sort of running businesses to consulting to businesses. And so in 1992, I sort of had a small company that was running on the side that was generating enough of an income for me to allow me to move off and try to do this on my own. And in 2002, I sold that last company and sort of cut the net out from under consulting, and since then I've been working along doing this, and it's been amazing. I've enjoyed it. I've traveled all over the world. My book got translated into Arabic. I was very excited about that.
And it was published by Putnam, if I'm correct.
And it was published by Putnam in 2005. The paperback came out in 2007. I would love to say I'm working on a second edition, and let's just say I'm working on a second edition. I have no idea when it will be coming out, because so far I think I have 8 or 9 words typed, but I am working on a second edition.
Well, I've looked at the book, and it's a remarkable summary of where you need to go as a business owner, entrepreneur. If you wouldn't mind, can you show the viewers the book? Sure. And I'll just close in on.
I just happen to have a copy right here.
So, how convenient.
Yes, the Daily Six is. It was designed originally to simply help find a balance between success and significance. Instead of just worrying about how am I perceived from an income standpoint or a A-list standpoint, it's also how am I perceived from a family standpoint. Do I give enough time to my family? Do I give enough time to my community? So a way in which we can sort of balance that, because I found that business people, I thought it was just me, but I found that business people tend to want to create all of this success and then come back and fix all the personal issues that are created by ignoring them for 10 or 15 years. And yet these are not pieces on a chessboard back here. They move around all by themselves. Kids wander away, wives wander away, husbands wander away. And so we really need to understand that life balance is not so much the amount of time we spend with people, but the amount of focus that we give them during the time that we have together. So we can all create a sense of life balance. It's just a matter of being more focused and more mindful when we're together.
That's beautiful, actually. Very compelling. Would you take us through, as briefly as you choose, the 6 daily steps?
Sure. Well, the first step is willingness, because in my mind, really, unless you're willing, nothing's really going to change. Unless you're willing to change your diet, you're never going to lose any weight. I joke in keynotes that everybody's on a low-fat diet after a heart attack, but it doesn't require a heart attack. But we as humans tend to want to be creating enough pain behind us to step forward. The second one is quiet time, and we can use quiet time any way we want: meditation, mindfulness, prayer, anything you want. It can be as religious or as non-religious as you'd like it to be. All I want you to do is have a quiet moment where you can sort of create a powerful and positive mindset for yourself, to create a path for the day. Because to me, a path is not so much a trail you can follow, but it's a trail that you can notice when you're wandered off of it. So what the quiet time can do is set us on a good path, set our intention for the day, give us a chance to return to that if we find ourselves off balance, and give us a chance to do one thing that very successful people tend to never do, which is to give us a chance to give ourselves credit for the things that we do well. Most of the time, all we do is focus on the things that we screw up during the day, not the things that we did well. Number 3 is service to others. And for Rotarians, we all know what that's all about. It's about changing the focus from me to you, and changing the focus from what am I going to get out of this to what am I going to put into this. And as we change that perspective, all of the relationships in our lives change. And I think Rotary is a perfect example of that. Number 4 is love and forgiveness, because to me those are 2 sides of the same coin. Love to me is defined as understanding the needs of someone else and treating those needs as important as if they were my own. And not more important or less important, just as important. Because when I wrote this initially, I was one of those type A people whose my job was to take as much as possible. Giving was not really on my mindset. But as I began to expand the scope of changing the focus, I started talking to groups with nurses and teachers and social workers, hospice workers, where their whole mindset is to give and give and give until they are completely burnt out. So the idea is to sort of balance that. Other people's needs are not more important or less important, just as important as my own. So I stay healthy, and through staying healthy, I keep you healthy. Forgiveness is, I guess, as simple as possible, giving up all hope of a better yesterday. Because yesterday is gone, and all we can do is work on today. That's really it. So let it go, stop carrying these gigantic bags of judgment, anger, resentment into work every day so that we can load them up even more and drag them back home every night. Number 5 is gratitude, because to me gratitude is the spice that we can sort of sprinkle on life to make it really flavorful and wonderful. Because when we're grateful to be married, it's a much different relationship than married. When we're grateful to have relationships with people who really care about us, that's different than just having a couple of friends or having a couple of kids, being grateful for children, being grateful for my life. Regardless of the good things or negative things, I find almost every time those gifts of devastation I talked about are negative things that force positive changes into our lives. So the idea of being grateful for all things at all times, not just good stuff. And then finally, the 6th component is action, because like with willingness, nothing starts without willingness, without action, nothing takes place. You know, it's just, if we're not moving forward, we're not changing. We're not creating change. So without action, nothing really happens. It's all driven by a combination of being willing to start and the action to build new ideas into permanence.
Now, the millennials who are watching are probably thinking, what graduate program did he go to? I wonder what college he went to. And I would bet, and I don't know the answer to this question, that you don't need graduate school or college. You need to pay attention to the cues in life to pick up the sentient way you have figured out to analyze our world. Please comment.
Well, I certainly had plenty of school, undergraduate and graduate, but nothing's less valuable than a 40-year-old master's degree. Let me just also explain that. I mean, I'm not quite old enough to have the business courses taught with an abacus, but close. You know, we did slide rules and stuff, so, which if this is a millennial watching this, you're going to have to look that up on Google. It's figuring out what a slide rule is.
Where did you go to school and what did you study?
University of South Carolina for business and University of Chicago for business. But really and truly, you know, I have found that a personal connection, one-on-one, it's one of the few things that my father did teach me that actually is valuable, which is people do business with people they like. And I have found that doesn't mean I need to be likable. Well, that certainly helps, but it doesn't mean that I have to be likable. It means I have to be interested in their needs, not my needs. I write about that all the time. Is that I just did an interview for a business journal about networking, and the idea was, how do you do effective networking? And it is, stop talking about me and start talking about you. You know, stop waiting for a person to call you back. If no one's calling you back, the reason is because they don't have any value or reason to call you back, because you are not expressing an interest in them. And that's the big issue, and that they don't teach you in business school. They don't teach you anything like that in business school. And the idea is, the more I focus on the success of others, the more successful I become. And that's a real simple technique, that's a real simple idea. It doesn't mean being friendly and warm and caring alone. What it means is be friendly, warm, and caring genuinely. Not superficially, and not to get a couple of more business cards, or not to build my Twitter feed a little bit deeper, or more LinkedIn connections. It means to really be genuinely interested in making other people successful. And if you do that, you'll never have a problem getting a call returned or an email followed up on, because they know that connecting with you brings value to them.
So in a way, it could be summarized by, if I could, by being both interesting and interested.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, you have to be able to have, you know, if you're gonna be successful, you have to have a product that somebody wants. I mean, that's just goes without saying. But that used to be all you really needed to have. You needed to have a product people want, and you just kind of made people aware of it, and then you just sat back and waited for them to come to you. But now that's the breadth of opportunity for people to buy stuff is so vast. And it's not just Amazon, it's consulting services and video work like we're doing here. You can do just about anything with anyone. So you really have to have a way in which you can still build that personal connection that was so prevalent, say, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, but it still can be very much done today. And the thing I've learned in working with millennials, I've done
even the 1870s, 1880s, and 1890s, even back then.
Well, yeah, I guess. That would be something my great-great-grandfather told me, not something that I'm personally aware of. But the thing is that even with millennials, the thing that's important here is to understand that I speak to a lot of Rotaract groups, and I keep getting asked about the concepts of optimism and mindset and these types of ideas, because positive mindsets, mindfulness, these are ideas that very much resound with millennials. And if you can do that, you can find yourself in a more peaceful, pleasant space with less stress and a much higher sense of enjoyment of life. So that's what I suggest.
That's wonderful. So in closing, tell us a little bit about your family and personal life. I know you were an avid runner. I think I once heard you ran thousands of miles a year.
Yeah.
You're obviously quite fit. Tell us a little bit about your family and some of your passions.
Well, before my skeletal system gave up on me completely, I did run a lot. 5-6 days a week, a couple thousand miles a year for 20-25 years, I guess.
Bravo.
But it's kind of went, nah, we're not doing that anymore. So now it's swimming or biking. But my family is really sort of the centerpiece of my life these days, because that's more important to me than almost anything else. Well, more important to me than anything else. My wife Susan and I have been married almost 31 years. We have 3 kids, a daughter Lisa, who has 3 of our grandchildren that lives in Atlanta. We have a son Dayton, who lives in San Diego, who is still single. So if anybody's out there in the San Diego area looking for a handsome young man who's in business for himself, please call me.
Check, check.
Check, check. And then our daughter Erin, who lives in Hawaii and has 2 of our grandchildren. So we have 5 grandchildren, 3 children, and Susan. And our dog Buddy, who you met earlier. So I think we have a wonderful family, and we have, the nice thing is that when that explosion happened in the early 90s, and the business went away, and I had to start rebuilding this business on a new set of principles, the family became the one thing that stood with me all through all the difficult times. And so when I rebuilt my business and my life, I rebuilt it on these new principles, which is family, community first, and then I'll worry about me. And the more that I focus on family and community and service, the more successful I seem to get.
Which is what makes you an ideal Rotarian, and we are so lucky to have you. And proof positive listening to you that the road to the top is not a straight line.
No, it's not a straight line, and it's certainly not even really it's lots of these. If life gets good, we don't eliminate this, we just kind of mitigate it just a little bit. So yeah, and the idea is to learn to enjoy and appreciate and learn from the downs as much as the ups.
John, thank you. This was rich. I enjoyed it. I know everybody watching will as well. And thank you so much for being a part of our community.
Thank you, Margie. I appreciate it. Thanks for the time.